Justine Valdez. The case of Justine Valdez. On May 19, 2018, Justine Valdez, 24, after completing the process for her residency permit application, went to the gym to exercise, finishing around 4:20 p.m. planning to return home. Her mother, Terrace, texted her to buy some bread on her way back. Justine agreed and stopped at the store before catching the 185 bus to Bray, which departed at 6:09 p.m. The bus dropped Justine off at a familiar stop near her rural home, known as Aina Car Village. It normally took her about 15 to 20 minutes to walk home. Though it wasn't a difficult route for someone as young and active as Justine, her family grew concerned when she failed to arrive home on time. Justine usually informed her family about her whereabouts and when she would return, so her mother, Terrace, became increasingly anxious as time went by without hearing from her. When Terrace tried to call and text Justine, there was no response. This led Terrace to go out and search for her. During her search, she asked passers-by if they had seen Justine, describing her physical appearance and the sporty outfit that made her noticeable. While some witnesses confirmed seeing Justine getting off the bus, no one knew where she went afterward. Terrace's efforts to find her daughter ended in growing fear and frustration. She had no clue what had occurred to Justine on her way home, and with every passing minute, her worry deepened. Terrace continued combing the streets for Justine, but still found nothing. Her daughter's disappearance left her heartbroken, unable to uncover any sign of her. In desperation, Terrace reached out to the police to report her missing. The authorities promptly recorded her statement and launched a search for Justine. As the police scoured the area, they began looking into Justine's personal life and social circles. It was discovered that she resided with her parents, Terrace and Daniel Valdez, in the peaceful rural community of Nisar, Ireland. Originally from the Philippines, Justine's parents had relocated to Ireland in 2015 in pursuit of a better future. Despite their challenging beginning, her parents worked tirelessly to support Justine's education and overall well-being. A dedicated student, Justine pursued accounting at university while working part-time to provide for herself and contribute financially to her family. Her part-time work included waitressing in Bray and babysitting for local families. Her parents, who resided in the servants' quarters of a large estate, were employed by a wealthy family, her mother as a housekeeper and her father as a gardener. Justine was recognized as responsible, hardworking, and deeply devoted to her family. Moreover, her small social circle and absence of typical teenage rebellious tendencies made the idea of her running away highly unlikely. When police contacted those who knew Justine, no one could provide any information regarding her whereabouts. The possibility of her running away was swiftly dismissed. She was exceptionally close to her parents and consistently kept them informed about her daily activities. On the day she disappeared, she exchanged 63 text messages with her mother, the final one being at 6:24 p.m. when Justine stepped off the bus. While police were searching for Justine, they received a crucial lead that pointed them toward a disturbing event that occurred just minutes after she got off the bus. A female driver reported seeing a man forcefully pushing a dark-haired Asian woman wearing tracksuit bottoms similar to Justine's into the trunk of a black Nissan Qashqai. The woman and her 12-year-old son drove past the scene and immediately contacted the police. Soon after, another driver witnessed a similarly troubling situation. This time, the Asian woman, who looked terrified, was spotted sitting in the back seat of the vehicle, knocking on the window in distress. The man who observed the scene spoke with his wife upon reaching home and promptly called the police at 7:20 p.m. to report what he believed to be a kidnapping. Before I continue, I want to remind you that only a small percentage of people who watch my videos are actually subscribed. So if you enjoy my content, consider subscribing. It's free, and you can always change your mind later. Now let's move on with the video. Another motorist also reached out to authorities about a Nissan being driven erratically near the same location. Police quickly responded to the area that had been reported earlier by the woman. Upon arrival, they discovered Justine's broken phone and a bag of bread lying on the roadside, findings that raised grave concerns for her safety. After the kidnapper attempted to force Justine into the trunk of his car but she resisted, he shoved her into the back seat and drove away toward an unknown destination. The suspect's black Nissan was immediately listed as wanted, triggering a large-scale search operation involving patrol cars and helicopters. However, the nighttime search was hindered by poor visibility and produced no significant results. The search persisted into the following day, with police reviewing witness statements to narrow down the area where the suspect might be located. A 40-year-old man named Mark Hennessy was soon identified because he matched the description of the abductor. When officers went to his residence, they learned from his wife, Nicola, that she did not know his whereabouts since he had gone out drinking after work the previous evening. This information only intensified suspicion around Mark, prompting investigators to dig deeper into his background. Mark Hennessy was regarded as a respected member of the community, known as a devoted husband and father to 2 young daughters, the youngest of whom had been born just 8 months earlier in September 2017. He lived in a well-off neighborhood surrounded by other young families. His job as an estimator on construction sites provided a stable income for his household, and he had no prior encounters with the law. However, the police understood that people often concealed their true natures behind a veneer of respectability. With this awareness, officers proceeded to the bar that Mark had visited the night before to gather additional information. The staff confirmed that Mark had indeed been there, though he did not remain for long. He left after drinking a beer and watching some football, but later returned to the bar around midnight, appearing visibly tense and restless. After reviewing the bar's security footage, police verified the staff's account. They observed that Mark had stayed there for about 10 minutes before leaving at 5:40 p.m. While engaged in a phone conversation, he quickly headed to his car and drove away. He then returned to the bar around 11 p.m., where he spoke briefly with an acquaintance at the entrance before leaving again. Investigators began examining Mark's movements between 5:40 p.m. and 11 p.m. A crucial breakthrough came when police analyzed surveillance footage along Justine's bus route. The footage revealed that Mark's black Nissan had been following the bus, beginning roughly 30 minutes after he left the bar. This unsettling discovery heightened suspicions about Mark's role in Justine's disappearance. The search for both Mark's car and the missing girl intensified, and Mark was officially identified as the primary suspect in Justine's abduction. Mark later phoned his wife, telling her that he was leaving for a long time. When his family urged him to surrender to authorities, he refused and left abruptly. His parents informed the police that they had seen him, prompting officers to launch a pursuit, but Mark managed to evade capture. The police subsequently appealed to the public through the media, asking anyone with information regarding Justine, Mark, or his car to come forward. A woman who heard the appeal stayed alert and spotted a vehicle resembling Mark's on the road. She discreetly followed it to Cherrywood Park, carefully observing the driver before quickly contacting the police. When officers arrived, they found a man covered in blood sitting in the driver's seat of a car. Despite repeated attempts to persuade him to exit the vehicle, Mark refused, waving a knife menacingly. Confronted with immediate danger, the officers were compelled to use force, resulting in Mark being shot in the shoulder. After pulling him from the car, they discovered he was still conscious but continued to resist cooperation. The police then searched the car but, to their dismay, did not locate Justine. Even after multiple rounds of questioning, Mark remained completely silent. Medical personnel promptly treated him and transported him to the hospital. Doctors worked to save his life, hoping he might eventually disclose Justine's whereabouts. Tragically, it was later determined that the bullet had ricocheted and struck Mark in the head. A subsequent investigation uncovered grim details. The blood covering his face and body was his own, and he bore several fresh stab wounds on his arms and neck. Authorities concluded that Mark, fearing imminent arrest, had likely attempted to take his own life with a knife from his car rather than face justice. Although the police had finally captured the suspect, there was no sense of relief, only disappointment. They had found the man responsible, but the missing girl was still nowhere to be found. A glimmer of hope emerged when police found a piece of paper at the scene. Although it was soaked in blood, the words "sorry" and "Pease Castle" were still legible. These words hinted that they might hold a clue to locating Justine. Despite the faint hope, investigators pressed on. A search operation was launched in a forest in South Dublin based on the clue referencing a castle. The first breakthrough came when searchers discovered Justine's wallet, which contained her identification. Then, on May 21st, search teams made the heartbreaking discovery of Justine's body. An autopsy revealed that she had been murdered on the night she was abducted, and that the cause of death was strangulation. Tragically, the examination also showed that Justine had been sexually assaulted, intensifying the horror of her killing. A toxicology report that detected trace amounts of banned substances, in her system left several unanswered questions. It remained unclear how those substances had entered her body or what their intended purpose had been. However, further investigation revealed that Mark had recently consumed large quantities of the same substances, deepening the mystery. It was discovered that Mark was a habitual user of drugs and excessive alcohol, which might have unintentionally introduced those substances into Justine's system. Meanwhile, his family life had begun to deteriorate due to his addictions, financial troubles, and constant arguments with his wife. Investigations into Mark's behavior uncovered that he had used the dating app Tinder to communicate with several women and often flirted with women at bars. The discovery of Mark's DNA on Justine's body further reinforced police suspicions of his involvement in her abduction and murder. As the investigation progressed, it became evident that the crime had been driven by sexual motives and that Justine had unknowingly become Mark's chosen victim. He had spotted Justine while following the bus and took advantage of her moment of vulnerability when she got off, brazenly abducting her from the street without hesitation, even in the presence of multiple witnesses. An investigation into Justine's and Mark's phones revealed no prior connection or communication between them. However, further analysis indicated that Mark was familiar with Justine's usual route, implying that her murder had been premeditated. It appeared that Mark had been carefully observing Justine's movements, waiting for the right moment to act. This discovery exposed the calculated cruelty of Mark's actions and the tragic fate that befell Justine. On the day of her abduction, he intentionally waited at the bus stop, watching her closely until the moment he suddenly seized her. The bystanders were deeply shocked by the incident, as such violent crimes were virtually unheard of in their quiet neighborhood. Many people came forward to express their condolences to Justine's family, offering comfort and support during their time of immense grief. At her funeral, heartfelt tributes were given as white balloons were released into the sky. Some mourners wore pink t-shirts bearing Justine's photo, a poignant gesture to honor her memory. Justine's family chose to hold her funeral in the Philippines, her homeland, seeking solace in a place that felt familiar. Although they lived abroad for some time afterward, they eventually returned to Ireland in 2021. By beginning anew in a different city and pursuing new careers, they hoped to leave behind the painful memories that continued to linger in their former home. Moving on to the next case. Lassie Rocha. Lassie Rocha was born on May 4, 1975, to Sharon and Dennis, but her parents separated when she and her older brother Brent were still children. Following the divorce, Lassie's mother married Ron, a dairy farmer, who became a father figure to her and played an important part in her upbringing. Lassie was a lively and cheerful person with a radiant smile and an energetic personality. She enjoyed interacting with others and was always enthusiastic about engaging in conversations, which made her naturally attention-seeking. She thrived in social environments and was recognized for her talent to brighten any room she entered. Growing up on a dairy farm, Lassie built a deep bond with nature. She spent much of her youth exploring the outdoors and appreciating the natural beauty surrounding her. One of her favorite pastimes was gardening alongside her mother, which became a meaningful source of happiness and satisfaction for them both. Lassie's affection for gardening would later influence her passions and career direction as an adult. Lassie served as a cheerleader at Thomas Downey High School, which perfectly complemented her bright and outgoing character. She left a strong impression at her school and became the epitome of an ideal cheerleader. After finishing high school, Lassie enrolled at California Polytechnic University, where she majored in ornamental horticulture because of her fascination with plants and wildlife. Lassie often visited a friend who worked at a restaurant in Morro Bay, and it was there that she met Scott Peterson, a colleague of her friend. Lassie was instantly drawn to Scott and became infatuated with him. She took the initiative by giving Scott her phone number. Scott soon contacted her, and they unexpectedly connected during their very first conversation. Scott then invited Lassie on their first date, which was a deep-sea fishing trip. However, things didn't go as expected for Lassie, who ended up getting seasick. Despite the rough beginning, Lassie and Scott's relationship flourished, and they eventually decided to move in together. Before meeting Lassie, Scott had dreams of becoming a professional golfer, but as their relationship grew, his focus changed, and he chose to pursue a career in business instead. Lassie completed her studies at Cal Poly in 1997, and Scott graduated the following year. This milestone marked the start of a new chapter in their lives, filled with hope and opportunity. On August 9, 1997, the couple got married in Isla Valley, San Luis Obispo County. The picturesque resort location offered a breathtaking backdrop for their special day. Surrounded by their family and friends, they celebrated their union and affirmed their dedication to one another. After their marriage, Lassie and Scott began a new business endeavor by opening a sports bar named The Shack in San Luis Obispo, California. The Shack, owned by Lassie and Scott, started out slowly but eventually built a loyal customer base, with weekends being especially crowded. After several prosperous years, the couple chose to sell the bar in 2000, looking for new ventures even though it was providing a steady income. After selling the business, they relocated to Lassie's hometown of Modesto, California, and bought a 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom house in an upscale neighborhood in October 2000. Lassie took a part-time position as a substitute teacher, while Scott worked for a European fertilizer company. Lassie dedicated herself to supporting Scott, maintaining their home, cooking, and keeping everything in order. She ensured their house was always comfortable and welcoming. In 2002, the couple received wonderful news. Lassie was pregnant, and they were expecting their first child. Lassie and Scott were going to have a baby boy, with a due date of February 10, 2003. They had already decided to name him Connor. On December 24, 2002, Scott claimed that he left their home at 9:30 a.m. to go fishing at the Berkeley Marina. He stated that he left Lassie at home on Christmas Eve morning with a busy day planned ahead. She intended to watch a Martha Stewart program, mop the floor, bake Christmas cookies, and take their dog, Mackenzie, for a walk in the park. However, one of their neighbors discovered Mackenzie wandering outside the home around 10:30 a.m. and placed the dog back in their backyard. When Scott returned from fishing that afternoon, he reported that the house was empty, with Mackenzie in the yard but no trace of Lassie. Her car remained parked in the driveway. Scott said he took a shower and washed his dirty fishing clothes immediately after arriving home. Once he finished, he realized Lassie was missing and became alarmed. He phoned her mother and stepfather, Sharon and Ron, but they said they had not heard from her the entire day and were deeply worried about her well-being. As the day progressed and Lassie was still missing, Scott and Sharon decided to report her disappearance to the police around 6 p.m. They emphasized to the authorities the urgency of finding Lassie, who was 7 months pregnant with their baby, Connor. The police then questioned Scott regarding his actions and whereabouts on the day Lassie disappeared. Scott informed officers that he had gone fishing at the Berkeley Marina, about 90 miles away from his home in Modesto, where he lived with his pregnant wife, Lassie. However, from the very beginning, investigators suspected foul play in Lassie's disappearance. Initially, the police did not treat Lassie's case as suspicious after Scott and his mother-in-law filed the missing person report. Lassie's family initially supported Scott, as the couple appeared perfect together, making it difficult to believe he could harm his wife. As the investigation advanced, police began to grow increasingly suspicious of Scott. About a month after Lassie went missing, they uncovered a shocking revelation. Scott had been involved in 2 secret affairs and maintained a long-term relationship with Amber Fry. Amber reached out to law enforcement on December 30, 2002, after discovering that Scott was being investigated in connection with Lassie's disappearance. Amber stated that she met Scott on November 20, 2002, and believed he was single. 2 weeks prior to Lassie's disappearance, Scott told Amber that he was a widower and that the upcoming Christmas would be his first without his wife. This revelation heightened police suspicions, leading them to wonder whether Scott had already planned to murder his pregnant wife. To collect evidence, investigators asked Amber to make recorded phone calls to Scott in hopes of obtaining a confession. Police also informed Lassie's family about Scott's infidelity, and when they showed her mother a picture of Scott with Amber, she became convinced of his guilt. The search for Lassie was extensive, involving law enforcement, family members, and hundreds of volunteers. In the first 2 days alone, over 900 people joined the search operations. During a press briefing, one of the officers involved in Lassie's case expressed concerns that she might not have left her home voluntarily on December 24, 2002. Lassie's disappearance drew massive media attention, with the tragic and mysterious story of a beautiful young woman vanishing from her home on Christmas Eve capturing the public's imagination. As people across the country sought answers and speculated about her fate, the focus on Lassie's case continued to intensify. When Lassie Peterson disappeared on December 24, 2002, A $25,000 reward was initially announced for any information leading to her safe recovery. As the investigation produced no significant leads, the reward was later increased to $500,000 in an effort to raise awareness and encourage more tips. To keep Lassie's case visible, posters were widely distributed throughout Modesto, California, and a friend's husband created a website to spread information about her disappearance. Months later, on April 13, 2003, a couple walking their dog in Richmond's Point Isabel Regional Shoreline Park made a horrifying discovery in a marshy area: the decomposed body of a male infant. The following day, another person found the body of a pregnant woman on the eastern side of the bay shore, approximately 1 mile from where the infant had been discovered. On April 18, 2003, DNA analysis confirmed that the remains belonged to Lassie and her unborn son, Connor. Lassie and Connor were later buried at Burwood Cemetery. The autopsy results revealed deeply disturbing details. The baby had 1.5 loops of nylon tape wrapped around his neck and a large incision on his body. Lassie's autopsy showed even more severe injuries: 2 fractured ribs, her upper torso hollowed out with internal organs missing, and her head and limbs detached. The medical examiner determined that the baby had died in the womb and was expelled from Lassie's body after her death. Investigators from the FBI and the Modesto Police Department conducted a thorough search of the couple's home, looking for evidence linking Scott to Lassie's disappearance. Their search uncovered several key findings, including a hair discovered in a pair of pliers on Scott's fishing boat. After forensic testing, the FBI confirmed that the hair matched Lassie's DNA. Along with the home search, investigators also conducted an extensive examination of Scott's truck and warehouse, searching for any clues connecting him to the crime. When the FBI examined Scott's boat, they found a homemade anchor, which he claimed had been made using a 90-pound bag of concrete that he had also used to repair his driveway. However, the prosecution believed that Scott had created multiple anchors and used 4 of them to weigh down Lassie's body in San Francisco Bay. The bodies found in the bay were later identified as Lassie and Connor, leading to Scott's arrest near a golf course. Notably, Scott's appearance had changed significantly. His dark brown hair was now blonde. When arrested, Scott's vehicle was found to be packed with various items, including a large sum of cash, survival gear, and camping equipment. The police also discovered 4 cell phones and 2 driver's licenses, one belonging to Scott and the other linked to his brother. This evidence suggested to the police that Scott was attempting to flee the state. Scott's father offered an alternative explanation for the driver's license found in Scott's possession. According to his father, Scott had borrowed his brother's license to get a discount at a golf course. As for why Scott's car was packed, his father claimed it was because Scott was living out of his car to avoid the media who were camping outside his house at the time. Scott's trial began in June 2004, a year after his arrest. During the opening arguments, the prosecution presented its case to the jury, arguing that Scott had killed Lassie because of his affair with Amber Fry. The prosecution highlighted Scott's suspicious behavior in the days leading up to and following Lassie's disappearance, pointing out inconsistencies in his statements to the police. Scott initially told the police he was fishing on the day Lassie went missing, but later told others he was golfing. The prosecution also noted that Scott asked the police if they had used cadaver dogs to search a park where Lassie was supposed to walk their dog, implying that Scott was aware of the potential crime scene and trying to cover his tracks. Scott's defense team presented a strong argument in court, highlighting that Scott's history of infidelity did not necessarily prove he was guilty of murdering his wife. They reasoned that Scott would not give up his life for someone he had only dated 4 times. The defense suggested that Lassie's hair might have been found in Scott's boat because she had visited the marina with him before. During the trial, 2 of Lassie's relatives testified that Scott showed no emotional response when his pregnant wife went missing. New evidence emerged when a realtor testified that Scott tried to sell their home in January, a month after Lassie's disappearance. Additionally, a salesman revealed that Scott traded in Lassie's car after she vanished. The prosecution viewed these events as incriminating evidence against Scott. Amber Fry, Scott's mistress, took the stand and shared details of their affair. The jury listened to secret recordings of Amber's phone calls with Scott, including one where he lied about being in Paris when he was actually attending a vigil for his missing wife. During the trial, a hydrologist and tide expert testified that it was possible for Lassie's body to have been dumped in the area where Scott claimed to be fishing on the day Lassie went missing. However, the defense team argued that there was a lack of credible evidence directly linking Scott to the crime. Their theory was that someone had kidnapped Lacey on Christmas Eve 2002, holding her captive until she gave birth to Connor, and then disposing of both bodies in the San Francisco Bay. The defense attorney emphasized that there was no concrete evidence to connect Scott directly to the crime and that other suspects could have been responsible. A significant issue arose during the trial when a juror was removed and replaced with an alternate due to misconduct. The dismissed juror had conducted unauthorized research on the case, violating legal procedures. Additionally, the foreman of the jury asked to be removed, and it was determined that his removal was necessary to ensure a fair and just trial. On November 12, 2004, a California jury found Scott guilty of 2 murder counts: first-degree murder for killing his wife Lassie, and second-degree murder for killing their unborn son Connor. The charge of first-degree murder for Lassie's death carried special circumstances due to the involvement of the fetus, making Scott eligible for the death penalty. After his conviction, the trial moved into the penalty phase to determine his sentence. During this stage, the jury examined various factors, including Scott's prior criminal record, circumstances that aggravated the offense, and those that could mitigate it. The jury unanimously decided that Scott should receive the death penalty. After carefully reviewing the evidence, the judge upheld the jury's recommendation, concluding that Lassie's murder was cruel, indifferent, heartless, and callous, which resulted in Scott being sentenced to death. As required by law, the sentence was automatically appealed, and the California Supreme Court heard the case in June 2020. During the appeal process, Scott's defense attorneys raised multiple arguments. They alleged that certain potential jurors were unfairly excluded, that 2 jurors were wrongly permitted to board Scott's boat, and that the trial should have been relocated to another county because of biased questionnaire results indicating that nearly half of potential jurors believed Scott was guilty before the trial began. The state responded by asserting that there was no proof supporting the claim that any juror was improperly dismissed and that none of the 12 jurors who ultimately decided Scott's fate displayed bias. In August 2020, the United States Supreme Court upheld Scott's conviction but overturned his death sentence. In 2004, a judge resentenced Scott to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole, leading to his transfer from San Quentin State Prison to Mule Creek State Prison in Ione, California. Around the same period, on April 1, 2004, President George W. Bush signed the Unborn Victims of Violence Act, UVVA, into law. Lassie's mother and stepfather attended the signing ceremony. Known as Lassie and Connor's Law, the legislation was created to ensure legal protection for unborn children in situations where their mothers are victims of violent crimes. The law recognizes the unborn child as a separate legal entity from the mother, making it a criminal offense to harm or kill the unborn child during an assault on a pregnant woman. This act acknowledges that an unborn child can be a victim of violence and is entitled to the same legal rights and protections as any other human being. Moving on to the next case. Maria Leone. Sometimes, confronting a painful truth is better than enduring the torment of uncertainty. That was precisely what Maria Leone believed when her 16-year-old daughter disappeared without a trace. At first, everyone held on to the hope that the girl would be discovered alive. But as time passed, those hopes slowly began to diminish. Maria started praying that her daughter would at least be found, even if no longer alive, so she could give her child a proper burial. Yet no one could have foreseen how dreadful the outcome would ultimately be. The case surrounding the murder of schoolgirl Melanie Stacy Amaya shocked Colombia with its brutality and appalling resolution. The most terrifying aspect was that the perpetrators were ordinary teenagers who had recently been romantically involved. Let us now revisit this dark story from the beginning to understand how a love-struck boy turned into a remorseless killer who executed his ex-girlfriend. We will also consider any adult negligence and ask whether this tragedy might have been avoided. Who exactly was Melanie Stacy Amaya? Today, our focus is on her life and her untimely end. Born on February 21, 2002, in the small town of San Rafael in northern Colombia, she was the eldest daughter in a humble family made up of Maria Leone and William Amaya. 2 years later, another daughter named Natalie was born. From early childhood, the two sisters were extremely close, sharing secrets and building strong bonds with their mother. Melanie revealed her creative side at a young age. She was a gifted artist and had a natural passion for cosmetics. She adored painting the faces of her dolls, as well as those of her mother, sister, and even her friends, often declaring that one day she would become a stylist and makeup artist. Academically talented as well, she performed strongly in school, where teachers described her as both gifted and determined, qualities that made her sociable and friendly. She could brighten any room she entered. Naturally charismatic, it was no surprise that Melanie had a wide circle of friends both in and out of school. Her attractive looks drew attention, further enhanced by her skillful use of cosmetics. But life took a difficult turn. At the age of 14, her parents filed for divorce, yet managed to separate amicably while preserving warm relations. Her father maintained close ties with his daughters, offering them both financial support and active involvement in their lives. Roughly 6 months later, Maria began a relationship with a man named Ruben Morales, whom she soon married. Following the wedding, the family relocated to Medellin, a major Colombian city. There, Ruben had stable employment, while the girls found many opportunities for education and personal development. Their stepfather built an excellent relationship with his teenage stepdaughters. He eagerly invested in their education and hobbies, ensuring they enjoyed a more comfortable life. Treating them as his own children, he surrounded them with care and affection. During her high school years, Melanie began showing a more challenging, somewhat rebellious side. She grew seriously interested in music, and even considered leaving school to devote herself entirely to this passion. Dreaming of becoming a DJ, she asked for a mixing console as a birthday gift. In addition, she acquired several large tattoos on her arms, back, chest, and leg, all bold and brightly colored. Her parents did not obstruct her path of self-expression, but were shocked when they discovered that Melanie was experimenting with illegal substances. Beneath her unconventional behavior and appearance experiments lay a connection that would ultimately lead to her tragic end. On her 14th birthday in 2016, Melanie chose to host a party, inviting all her friends along with a DJ. Unable to afford a professional musician, but having received contact details from acquaintances, Melanie reached out to 16-year-old Miguel Angel Perea, a budding yet skilled disc jockey. After some hesitation, the birthday girl decided to call him. Miguel turned out to be exceptionally talented and carried a striking charisma that completely captivated young Melanie. After celebrating her birthday, the two continued communicating. Within weeks, the teenagers were often seen together, walking through parks or along the city streets. Melanie introduced him as her boyfriend. They quickly became inseparable, openly showing their affection, holding hands tenderly, and demonstrating their feelings wherever they went. Miguel came from rather modest, indeed poor, backgrounds, yet he treated his young girlfriend with respect and admiration, captivated by her and almost instantly winning over those he met with his genuine charm. He warmly introduced himself to her parents, earning their acceptance, facing no resistance, and thereby supporting the relationship. Over time, he spent increasingly more time at their residence, practically tied to it, and became part of the family dynamic. Miguel once confided in the girl's parents about difficulties at home. His mother disapproved of his pursuit of music lessons, which led to conflict that escalated into him being physically assaulted and eventually expelled from his home. Maria extended temporary shelter to him until the situation could stabilize, unaware of the possible consequences of introducing a disruptive influence into their household. As a result, Melanie and Miguel began living together. At first, they enjoyed a harmonious period lasting 6 months, during which both teenagers appeared thrilled with their new life together. However, as time passed, Miguel revealed traits of his character that negatively affected Melanie. Her academic achievements began to decline noticeably. Her behavior and appearance grew increasingly provocative. She also accumulated more tattoos and spoke of leaving school altogether. Over time, arguments between the couple became more frequent. While they initially attempted to settle disputes away from the family home, eventually these confrontations spilled openly into it. A serious concern for Maria emerged when she discovered that her eldest daughter was using illegal substances supplied by Miguel. In response, Maria confronted Melanie in a serious discussion. Tearfully, Melanie admitted to limited experimentation with drugs and promised never to repeat such actions. Despite concluding that it was best for Miguel to leave because of his negative influence, Melanie defended him, solemnly vowing better behavior for both herself and Miguel in the future. After much hesitation, Maria and Ruben reluctantly agreed, a decision that proved another mistake, as troubling signs soon reappeared. They noticed unexplained bruises on their daughter's body, but Melanie always attributed them to sports or clumsiness rather than implicating her boyfriend. 6 months later, a serious incident took place. During a heated quarrel, Miguel assaulted the girl so violently that she required medical care. Maria wanted to report the assault and bodily harm to the police, but Melanie dissuaded her, insisting she would deny everything and refuse to accuse her boyfriend. Melanie's parents attempted to separate the couple and forbade them from living together. However, Melanie threatened to run away with him if their relationship was obstructed in any way. This toxic bond persisted for more than 2 years until Melanie finally realized it was damaging her well-being. In early May 2018, another heated quarrel erupted between the teenagers, escalating into physical violence. This time, Melanie took the initiative and told Miguel their relationship was finished. She demanded he gather his belongings and leave her house immediately, or she would report the abuse to the police. Miguel complied with her demands, but later pleaded for forgiveness. Despite this, he was unable to let go emotionally. Miguel began stalking Melanie, following her whereabouts and monitoring the people she associated with. He regularly called and messaged her, with his texts alternating between declarations of love and remorse and direct death threats. Disturbed by his obsessive behavior, Ruben sought a restraining order against Miguel to protect his stepdaughter. Nevertheless, law enforcement dismissed his concerns regarding the situation as nothing more than teenage drama. Maria also contacted the prosecutor's office, warning of the potential danger Miguel posed. However, authorities failed to take her seriously. They assumed incorrectly that an 18-year-old boy would not harm his ex-girlfriend, a belief that overlooked his true character. Nearly 2 months after the couple's breakup, a mysterious disappearance shocked everyone. Miguel appeared to have calmed down, no longer seeking encounters with Melanie. The girl resumed her normal life. Her grades at school improved significantly. She spent time with friends and practiced music again. Her parents also no longer had any reason to be concerned. They tried to erase their daughter's former boyfriend from memory and forget him as one would a bad dream. On June 28, 2018, Melanie was thrilled to attend a birthday celebration for her close friend. The event was set to take place at one of the city's most popular nightclubs. Wanting to look her best, Melanie carefully prepared, choosing an outfit, applying makeup, and styling her hair. Once satisfied, she said goodbye to her mother, assuring her she wouldn't be too late, before leaving in a waiting cab. Maria trusted her daughter's friends enough not to worry excessively. However, the following morning brought alarm when Maria realized Melanie had not returned home. She tried contacting her, but discovered that her phone was turned off, an unsettling sign. Still, Maria attempted to remain calm, convincing herself the teenagers might have simply lost track of time and that Melanie's phone battery could have died. Around midday, Maria phoned Isaac and was stunned to learn Melanie never made it to the party. None of her friends had seen or heard from her either. Panicked, Maria began calling all of Melanie's friends and classmates. Sadly, no one could offer any helpful information about her whereabouts since she left the house. In response, Maria immediately contacted William, Melanie's father, who rushed over at once. Together with Ruben, the stepfather, they went to the police station to file a missing persons report. However, they were met with bureaucratic indifference, as authorities insisted on waiting 24 hours and suggested Melanie might simply be asleep at a friend's home after the party. Unwilling to waste precious time waiting passively for answers, the parents, along with Ruben, decided to act quickly on their own. They mobilized relatives and friends to aid in the search by contacting all known acquaintances and checking familiar places where she might have gone, while also distributing hundreds of flyers throughout the city in hopes of finding clues to Melanie's location. Moving on to the next case. Marie Carlson. In 1974, a baby girl named Marie was born in the Philippines to an ordinary family. Worried about her daughter's future, Marie's mother made the difficult choice to send her to the United States, believing Marie would have greater opportunities for success there. As a result, Marie was placed in a foster family with a military background, where she met a young girl named Esther, who was the same age as her. The two girls quickly became close friends, unaware of a surprising truth that secretly connected them. What Marie didn't realize was that her American foster father was actually her biological parent, making Esther her biological sister. As time passed and they grew older, the sisters eventually left their parents' home and chose to build a new life together. They settled in Florida, renting a cozy apartment near a karaoke club that soon became their favorite gathering spot. Marie Carlson's life was a vibrant reflection of her favorite color, pink. She firmly believed that living beautifully was important, surrounding herself with flowers and lovely things. But everything changed when she met Jeff and discovered a deeper meaning in life, love. The two quickly fell for each other, married, and welcomed a daughter named Paris, a name that symbolized the love and beauty they shared. Despite their happy family life, Jeff remained a mystery. His past and even his last name were shrouded in secrecy. At the same time, Marie was determined to succeed in her career. She aspired to join the Federal Bureau of Investigation, FBI, and was studying criminal law to achieve her dream. However, her journey was far from easy. As she advanced in her career, the challenges became more difficult, and despite her greatest efforts, she ultimately left the police service without fulfilling her dream. Marie's life then took a devastating turn as a mental health disorder gradually worsened over time. The trauma of being sexually abused as a child had left her with deep emotional wounds. As a result, her daily life grew increasingly painful, and her relationship with her husband, Jeff, began to deteriorate. The love they had once shared started to fade, and their marriage eventually ended in divorce. The separation was a painful but necessary decision, as both Marie and Jeff knew they needed to put their daughter, Paris, first. They agreed it would be best for Paris to live with Jeff, giving her the chance to escape the negativity that had consumed their home. Despite the difficulties, they completed the required paperwork amicably and with little conflict. Throughout the long and challenging divorce process, Marie and Jeff stayed focused on making choices that would ensure Paris's well-being. They remained on good terms and continued to care for one another as friends. Marie appreciated Jeff's support and made spending quality time with Paris a priority, never missing a single birthday. Although Marie had endured many hardships, she remained steadfast and refused to give up. Despite her struggles, she never lost hope. One day, she discovered what had been missing from her life, faith. This new faith led her to the Emerald Coast Church, founded by the charismatic pastor James Flanders and his wife, Tanya. From the moment she entered the church, Marie felt a strong sense of belonging. The warm and welcoming environment, together with Pastor James Flanders' heartfelt and genuine sermons, made her feel truly at home. Marie began the process of recovery and healing from her painful past, working to make amends and move forward. The Flanders, known for their kindness and generosity, had built a sanctuary where people could find comfort and support. For Marie, the church became far more than a place of worship. It became a loving community that embraced her with open arms. As she surrounded herself with the compassion of the church, Marie slowly began to heal and grow. With each passing day, she felt a new sense of freedom and joy she had never experienced before. She was no longer the lost and broken person she once had been. Instead, she had become a strong and radiant woman, filled with hope and happiness. As she gazed out at the bright Florida landscape, Marie's eyes sparkled with a new light, mirroring the beauty and joy that had blossomed within her soul. The church was more than a building. It was a community bound by genuine care and compassion. For Marie, this small congregation became a second family, overflowing with love, warmth, and faith. On the surface, the church appeared ordinary, but inside it radiated comfort, a true home where people gathered in unity through their shared belief. Yet behind Marie's smile, she carried a secret. She was pregnant, and the burden of it weighed heavily on her. She felt consumed by shame and fear, with only a handful of close confidants aware of the truth. In June 2021, at 37 years old, Marie gave birth to her second daughter, Grace. As word spread across the quiet town, whispers arose about the identity of the baby's father. The truth was heartbreaking. He was a man Marie had dated briefly, who revealed himself to be abusive and cruel. When she became pregnant, he vanished without a trace. Left abandoned and deeply hurt, Marie sought refuge in the church. The Flanders family and the congregation responded with overwhelming kindness, embracing Marie and her newborn with unconditional support. They created a safe and nurturing environment, becoming the family Marie desperately needed. Through their compassion, Marie began to rebuild her strength, finding courage, hope, and the will to continue healing from her past wounds. Despite this support, Marie still felt trapped, and just 3 months after Grace's birth, she made a shocking decision that left everyone stunned. She posted a cryptic message on social media announcing that she was leaving, not only her city, but also her family and friends behind. For some time, she had been quietly planning her departure, careful to keep her intentions hidden for fear of being persuaded to stay. Her message hinted only at her dreams and expressed love for those she was leaving, making it clear she was gone for good. Her sudden disappearance left many questions unresolved. Where was she headed? What journey lay before her? And could she ever achieve the life she longed for? Her loved ones were left devastated, gripped by fear for her safety and uncertain of what steps to take next. The uncertainty surrounding Marie's disappearance only deepened her family's anxiety. Jeff, her ex-husband, was especially frantic and reached out to the police for help in locating her. As the days went by, fear and worry over Marie's fate continued to escalate. Her sudden vanishing from Fort Walton Beach had barely left the headlines when a disturbing detail came to light. Marie had abandoned her 3-month-old daughter. This revelation caused immediate alarm for her sister, Esther, who understood Marie's fierce devotion to her children. "This is out of character for her," Esther said, her voice trembling. She has always been extremely protective of her kids. Those who knew Marie were stunned by her disappearance. As a mother, she had always been exemplary, especially in her care for her 7-year-old daughter, Paris. Jeff, her ex-husband, was particularly shaken when he learned Marie had stopped visiting Paris, given how inseparable they had once been. At 37, Marie had suddenly vanished without a trace. While she had every right to seek a fresh start, the police could not ignore the troubling fact that she had left her infant daughter behind. As investigators examined Marie's recent communications, they uncovered a peculiar detail. Her writing style had changed drastically compared to before. This raised suspicions that she might have been under pressure when writing them, or that the messages had been fabricated. The investigation soon extended into Marie's private life. Questions arose about the true identity of Grace's father and the exact nature of his relationship with her. Yet even her sister, Esther, could neither confirm nor deny the rumors. The police found themselves unraveling a complex tangle of secrets tied to Marie's disappearance. Mysterious messages, uncertainty about Grace's paternity, and the unexplained circumstances surrounding her vanishing. To shed light on the matter, investigators turned to Tanya and James Flanders. The couple revealed that Marie had a history of disappearing for brief periods without giving any explanation. The Flanders also revealed that Marie had been diagnosed with bipolar disorder, a condition that might have played a role in her unpredictable behavior. Just weeks before her disappearance, she went through a severe depressive episode. Though she began taking medication, she was forced to stop once her pregnancy was confirmed. Feeling overwhelmed and unwell, Marie asked the Flanders to care for her daughter while she tried to recover. After lunch one day, Marie lay down to rest, and Tanya left with Grace to go shopping. James remained at the house to watch over Marie, but briefly stepped out to his own home. When he returned, he was stunned to discover that both Marie and her car had vanished. The Flanders immediately began searching for her, driving through nearby streets and checking parking lots, but there was no trace of her. Then James thought to check the airport, and to their shock, they found Marie's car parked there. Using a spare set of keys, he drove it back to the house. When investigators examined the vehicle, they found no unusual marks or evidence that might reveal what had happened to Marie. Hoping for answers, the investigators returned to the airport to dig deeper. Their plan was to review surveillance footage from the parking lot, which by regulation should have been archived, and to check the airline ticket for possible fingerprints. Yet when they located the ticket, it offered no help. It was completely clean, showing neither prints nor other useful traces. A thorough search of Marie's car also turned up nothing, and the parking stub revealed no fingerprints either. To make matters worse, investigators discovered that the airport's parking lot cameras had not been functioning on the day Marie disappeared. This absence of footage dealt a serious blow to the case, leaving investigators to wonder whether her disappearance had been an unfortunate accident or a carefully orchestrated escape. As inquiries pressed on, suspicion grew that Marie's fate might be far darker than originally assumed. The case was officially reclassified as a murder investigation, and detectives shifted their attention toward the enigmatic father of her baby daughter, Grace. The police went back to the church, hoping to uncover answers to their growing list of questions. Who was the father of Grace, and what part did he play in Marie's disappearance? The church where Marie had once found comfort was now filled with gossip and speculation. Parishioners whispered about her secret and the plan she had been struggling with. Marie had battled depression and even considered having an abortion, but the Flanders family, who longed to enlarge their family, strongly objected to the idea. They urged Marie to leave her baby with them, while at the same time hypocritically presenting themselves as supportive. Privately, the couple had been desperate for another child despite both being over 40. One church member even claimed that Marie's baby, Grace, was a divine reward granted to the Flanders for their good deeds. The case took a dramatic shift when Jeff, Marie's ex-husband, arrived to provide critical information. Though not Grace's father, Jeff had noticed Marie's pregnancy and directly questioned her about it. Marie lied, telling him she was acting as a surrogate for the Flanders. However, the investigation soon exposed the truth. Detectives interviewed Tanya's friends, who were also members of the church, and eventually the facts emerged. James was the biological father, and the conception had occurred naturally. This left Tanya in a painful position, forced to silently endure the situation. The revelation caught the investigators' full attention, and both James and Tanya were called in for further questioning. Only Tanya appeared, and she confirmed the story, adding that she had been present at the moment of conception. According to her, everything happened with the agreement of all parties involved. After Marie's disappearance, unsettling details about her relationship with James and Tanya surfaced. It was revealed that James had been intimately involved with both women, which went beyond mere infidelity, amounting instead to a form of polygamy. At one point, they even celebrated the child's birthday together, taking a photo of James, Tanya, and Marie posing as a happy family. However, this photo was meant to mislead, suggesting that the celebration was only for Tanya and that Marie was not involved. But after questioning Tanya's friends, the investigation uncovered new information that revealed the true nature of their relationship. Although Tanya claimed that Marie was initially happy with the arrangement, it became clear that this was no longer the case at some point. Marie's feelings for her daughter Grace were stirred after she was born, and she became hesitant to give her up to Tanya. According to friends, Marie's reservations fueled her jealousy of Tanya, sparking suspicion that Marie might not want to surrender her child to her rival and planned to steal James away from her. These rumors swiftly elevated Tanya to the top of the suspect list. Following Marie's disappearance, all Tanya's problems would essentially dissolve, granting her the opportunity to raise Grace solo and retain her status as James's beloved wife. However, 2 months had passed since Marie vanished, yet no leads emerged. Investigators diligently attempted to unravel the mystery surrounding Marie's disappearance using available tools, including GPS data. Despite its limitations in 2011, investigators focused on analyzing phone records and message logs to gather more information. The records revealed that Marie had accompanied James to the airport, but Tanya was absent. This development coincided with the unexpected visit of Jason, a young priest who often represented James and ultimately chose to share information with investigators. Jason shared with others a conversation he had unintentionally overheard after Marie vanished. James expressed his distress and concern, stating that he would have to leave the country due to Marie's disappearance, but he couldn't disclose the details. He only mentioned that something terrible had occurred during Marie's severe depression. Prior to her disappearance, James had stayed with Marie at a clinic for a few days, while Jason temporarily took his place. Meanwhile, whispers of polygamy began to spread among the church congregation, and when Jason learned of them, he was stunned. After James returned from the hospital, Jason confronted him about the rumors and directly asked about his relationship with Marie. James admitted the truth. He was romantically involved with both his wife and Marie. He also confessed that before Marie's disappearance, they had a heated argument that escalated into a physical confrontation. Still, James insisted that Marie had been alive when she vanished. Soon after this conversation, James resigned from his position as pastor and, together with Tanya and Grace, left the city to start over in Arizona. Not long before their departure, Marie's family contacted the Flanders to collect some of her belongings. Through this, investigators gained access to Marie's phone, which might have contained critical evidence. At first, the investigation was hampered, as most of the information on James' phone had been wiped. Yet investigators managed to retrieve fragments, including a video of James promoting precious metals. This discovery raised suspicions, especially since the case unfolded in 2011, a time when erasing digital evidence was far easier and surveillance far less comprehensive. Back then, DNA testing and forensic methods were still developing, giving criminals the illusion they could act without consequence. But advances in digital forensics soon turned the tide. 3 years after Marie's disappearance, new software became available, allowing investigators to recover deleted data from phones and computers. This breakthrough opened access to messages exchanged between James and Marie, which revealed the troubling dynamics of their relationship. Among the recovered files were explicit photographs, some taken inside a church. Even more revealing were Marie's emails to James, in which she expressed a desperate longing to leave Fort Walton Beach, calling the place cursed. Her messages showed her overwhelming desire to escape with her child. A chain of dramatic and unforeseen events would eventually bring to light the darkest secrets of the Flanders family. Flanders once said, "When someone spreads rumors or causes him harm, he wants them to cease to exist." Considering James' situation, engulfed in secrecy and fear, it was possible he carried out this dark promise. Although Marie's body had not been found, the evidence was strong enough for authorities to issue an arrest warrant charging James with second-degree murder. Still, the prosecutor faced a daunting challenge, persuading the jury of James' guilt without the victim's body. With their future hanging in uncertainty, James and his lawyer made a drastic last-resort decision to try to change the outcome. If James disclosed the location of Marie's body, the charge would be reduced to manslaughter, carrying a lighter sentence. After years of torment, Marie's family reluctantly agreed to the deal. James' admission finally exposed the grim truth. His relationship with Marie had been stormy, plagued by frequent clashes over her depression. During one particularly heated quarrel, Marie lashed out at him physically, and in his effort to calm her, James accidentally knocked her down. Tragically, she died as a result. Stricken with remorse, James tried to resuscitate her, but his attempts failed. Investigators later uncovered Marie's body buried 5 feet beneath the soil in James' yard, wrapped tightly in a blanket. The revelation stunned all who had searched for her tirelessly over the years. James was ultimately convicted of manslaughter and sentenced to 15 years in prison, with eligibility for parole after 11 years. Tanya, his wife, maintained she had no knowledge of the crime and was devastated upon learning of Marie's fate. Because Marie's body was discovered only after a long delay, forensic experts were unable to determine the exact cause of death, a fact that may have shaped the course of the investigation. 5 years after her disappearance, Marie's loved ones were finally able to lay her to rest at a funeral, where her sister Esther may have sung one last song in her memory. Moving on to the next case. Mary Catherine Higdon. Mary Catherine Higdon was born in 1994. Mary was an energetic and joyful child who loved entertaining people with her humor, impressions, and playful behavior. She had a unique attachment to her pet frog, which she often took for walks around town. Mary was fond of the outdoors, enjoying time spent exploring nature and admiring its beauty. She was also passionate about performing, frequently putting on shows for her family that highlighted her imagination and creativity. Her family recognized great promise in her and believed she had a bright future ahead. As she matured, Mary developed a deep interest in firearms. She learned to handle guns responsibly and valued their power. She became a proficient marksman and continued refining her abilities. During her high school years, Mary met her partner, Stephen Freeman, who became the love of her life. Stephen was born on January 1, 1995, in Griffin, Georgia, where he was raised with his parents and brother. He experienced a joyful childhood surrounded by a devoted family and many friends who described him as relaxed, kind, and considerate. Stephen enjoyed being outdoors and exploring nature. He was especially close to his parents, though he had an even more special connection with his mother. When she graduated from college after returning to school, Stephen wrote her a heartfelt letter expressing his admiration for her accomplishment. In the letter, he commended her perseverance and hard work, saying he admired her every day and loved her more than words could express. Stephen had tremendous respect and appreciation for his mother, which was evident in the way he spoke about her. After meeting in high school, Stephen and Mary Catherine built a strong connection, united by their passion for outdoor pursuits like hiking, camping, fishing, and hunting. Their shared love of nature became the basis of their enduring relationship. After finishing high school, the couple decided to take the next step by moving in together in Griffin, Georgia. Living together in their own home filled Mary Catherine and Stephen with excitement. Furthermore, Stephen's mother embraced Mary Catherine as part of their family, treating her like a daughter. Every Sunday, the couple visited Stephen's parents for a large family dinner, a tradition that brought everyone closer and reinforced Mary Catherine's role within the family. Stephen's friends were at first uncertain about his relationship with Mary Catherine, but as they spent more time with her, they grew to value her positive effect on Stephen's life. They noticed how much happiness and joy she brought him, and they admired her passion for the outdoors. Stephen and Mary Catherine held different jobs. Stephen was employed as a metal worker, specializing in roof repairs. Mary Catherine, meanwhile, held two part-time positions. She worked as a teacher's assistant at St. George's Episcopal School, a preschool in Milner, Georgia. She was also employed at a sporting goods store, where she sold firearms. Interestingly, one of Stephen's close friends, Thomas Skinner, also worked with Mary Catherine at the sporting goods shop. While working at the store, Mary Catherine learned the basics of gun safety, including how to correctly handle, load, and fire a gun. Likewise, Stephen shared a strong enthusiasm for firearms and owned several shotguns and rifles for hunting and target shooting. He also kept a Glock 42 handgun at home for personal protection. After 5 years together, Mary Catherine and Stephen were still living in their Griffin, Georgia, apartment by the summer of 2018. However, their relationship took a devastating turn on August 1st, when Mary Catherine made a frantic 911 call, bringing their high school romance to a tragic end. In the call, Mary Catherine screamed to the dispatcher that she had just accidentally shot her boyfriend. Police responded swiftly to the emergency call and arrived at the apartment shared by Stephen and Mary Catherine. There, they discovered Mary Catherine in a state of hysteria, sobbing and hyperventilating as she knelt beside Stephen's lifeless body. She repeatedly cried out that she could not lose him, her voice overflowing with pain and desperation. As the officers gently moved Mary Catherine away from Stephen, they were able to examine his condition. They found that he had been shot in the chest, yet astonishingly, he was still alive. The police immediately summoned an ambulance to rush Stephen to the nearest hospital. In the emergency room, a team of skilled doctors worked tirelessly to save Stephen's life. Despite their relentless efforts, his condition continued to deteriorate. Tragically, the seriousness of his injury ultimately proved fatal, and Stephen succumbed to his wounds. After Stephen was transported to the hospital, Mary Catherine went with the police to the station for an official interview. Mary Catherine described what had happened on the night she accidentally shot Stephen. She explained that she was giving him the gun, since he usually kept it by his bed for protection. However, she emphasized that they never loaded the chamber of their guns at home. While questioning her, the officers detected alcohol on Mary Catherine's breath. As they pressed her further, her account shifted. At first, she claimed she had handed Stephen the gun, but later said she had tossed it to him. The police grew doubtful of her inconsistent statements, knowing a firearm would not discharge simply because it was thrown. Someone had to pull the trigger. The investigation showed that Mary Catherine must have been aiming the weapon directly at Stephen for the bullet to strike where it did, considering the placement of his chest wound. During the interview, Mary Catherine confessed, "I did it out of anger." Unfortunately, at that very moment, the recording equipment malfunctioned, leaving her words inaudible. Even with the missing recording, the police still possessed strong evidence indicating Mary Catherine's intent to harm Stephen. At the couple's apartment, investigators discovered proof of a heated dispute, including food scattered throughout the home. In addition, police records revealed that officers had answered 5 domestic disturbance calls at their residence within the past year. Investigators also determined that the firearm used in the shooting had been loaded on the night of the event, directly contradicting Mary Catherine's statements. These findings together led investigators to conclude that Mary Catherine had deliberately shot her boyfriend, Stephen. The police discovered cooking grease residue on both the gun and its magazine, which suggested that Mary Catherine, who had been preparing dinner at the time, had loaded the weapon herself. After the shooting, officers turned to Stephen's friends for insight into the couple's relationship. According to them, Mary Catherine and Stephen's bond was plagued by constant arguments and toxicity. They described the couple as frequently engaging in intense and heated disputes. Mary Catherine was characterized as possessive and verbally abusive towards Stephen, with signs of mental instability that further strained their relationship. Whenever Stephen tried to create distance by leaving their apartment, Mary Catherine would overwhelm him with a flood of calls and text messages, to the point where he sometimes had to block her. One of Stephen's friends even revealed that Stephen had confided in him about Mary Catherine's repeated threats with a firearm. Specifically, she had pointed a gun at him on at least 3 different occasions. Despite this, Stephen refrained from reporting these incidents to authorities, fearing that Mary Catherine would face legal consequences. His friends emphasized that Stephen's main concern was always Mary Catherine's well-being, even when it endangered his own safety. When Stephen's friends first heard that Mary Catherine had claimed to accidentally shoot him, they were doubtful. They knew she was experienced with firearms and highly unlikely to mishandle one by mistake. In fact, just 3 months before the shooting, Stephen had texted a friend to say that Mary Catherine was outside behaving wildly, screaming, and trying to shoot both him and herself. Stephen confided to a friend that Mary Catherine had previously pointed a gun at him, but the most recent incident left him especially shaken. Her eyes looked so intense that he feared she might actually pull the trigger. By July 2018, Stephen had grown exhausted with Mary Catherine's behavior and was seriously considering leaving her. That month, he even planned to secretly move to another town while she was out, without telling her in advance. He was terrified of how she might react if she discovered his plan. Just 2 days before Mary Catherine fatally shot Stephen, police uncovered a series of telling text messages from July 30th. The conversation began with Stephen sending a warm message to Mary Catherine. "Good morning, beautiful. Don't forget." Mary Catherine replied, "Have a great day." Stephen answered back, "You too, love you." However, on the night of July 31st, Stephen avoided Mary Catherine's calls and texts while they were in the middle of an argument and instead spent the evening at a friend's house. On the night of August 1st, Mary Catherine was at home preparing dinner when she realized Stephen wasn't there. She contacted Stephen's mother, who informed her that he was with a friend. Enraged and feeling betrayed, Mary Catherine drove to the friend's house, determined to confront Stephen. When she arrived, she saw Stephen sitting in the passenger seat of his friend's truck. Mary Catherine pulled up beside them and began yelling at Stephen, who tried to calm her down by promising he would come home soon. Although Stephen's friends later stated that Mary Catherine had pointed a gun at him on multiple occasions, Mary Catherine forcefully denied the allegations. She maintained that she had never aimed a gun at Stephen. However, she did admit to having threatened to take her own life with a firearm on several occasions. In a later interview, Stephen's mother shared her perspective, believing that one of the main reasons Stephen stayed with Mary Catherine for so long was because she frequently threatened to harm herself. Stephen feared she might follow through on those threats if he decided to leave her. However, on the night of the incident that resulted in Stephen's shooting, Mary Catherine claimed that Stephen was the one who became aggressive and violent. According to her account, Stephen threw the dinner she had prepared directly in her face. Mary Catherine stated that she only picked up the gun in order to defend herself and scare Stephen away. She wanted him to leave the apartment, but Stephen allegedly lunged toward her, which frightened her. As she backed away, the next thing she realized was that Stephen was bleeding from the chest. At the time of the shooting, Mary Catherine did not share this version of events with the police because she was embarrassed to admit that Stephen had a history of violence against her. She alleged that Stephen had struck her in the past and was controlling. She even recalled one incident where Stephen kicked her out of bed with such force that she hit her head against the door frame. However, Stephen's friends offered a different perspective on their relationship. They claimed to have witnessed Mary Catherine being physically aggressive toward Stephen, including slapping him hard across the face. Mary Catherine's sister contradicted her narrative, revealing that she had seen bruises on Mary Catherine's arm 2 weeks before Stephen was killed. When asked about them, Mary Catherine confided to her sister that Stephen had grabbed her, causing the injuries. After investigating Stephen's death as a homicide, authorities charged Mary Catherine with murder, aggravated assault, and possession of a firearm during the commission of a felony. The prosecution extended a plea deal, offering a life sentence with the possibility of parole if she pleaded guilty. However, Mary Catherine refused the deal, choosing instead to go to trial and assert her innocence. At trial, Mary Catherine maintained that she had shot Stephen in self-defense, denying all charges brought against her. The trial, which commenced on June 17, 2019, nearly a year after Stephen's death, revealed the turbulent nature of Mary Catherine and Stephen's relationship. Mary Catherine's lawyers argued that she acted out of genuine fear, citing Stephen's history of violence and abuse. Mary Catherine testified that she was the target of Stephen's controlling, manipulative, and dangerous conduct, which encompassed physical, mental, emotional, verbal, and sexual abuse. She recounted being struck, humiliated, and demeaned by Stephen on numerous occasions, and related specific incidents in which he had manhandled her and verbally degraded her. Mary Catherine explained that Stephen's continual threats and abuse left her feeling trapped, fearing for her life, and constantly walking on eggshells to avoid provoking his anger. She produced evidence in the form of text messages, including one in which Stephen threatened to punish her, which she interpreted as a promise of physical harm. Another text revealed Stephen explicitly threatening to hit her back twice as hard if she defended herself. Mary Catherine's defense also submitted messages that corroborated her claims of sexual assault, including a text in which Stephen referenced his red room, which she described as a setting where they engaged in violent and aggressive intercourse. Mary Catherine testified that Stephen sexually assaulted her on 2 occasions, including once after they returned from a trip near Disney World, when he allegedly ignored her pleas to stop and escalated his actions instead. The defense introduced more than 60 pages of text messages from Stephen that illustrated his pattern of verbal assaults and threatening conduct toward Mary Catherine. These messages contained disturbing images and captions, such as one showing Stephen holding a dead fish with the caption, "This is you." Another message included Stephen's violent threats after Mary Catherine cheated on him, where he wrote, "I'm going to wreck you for wrecking me." The defense also contended that Stephen's drug and alcohol addiction fueled his violent outbursts. Mary Catherine insisted that she was the one who ended the relationship, not Stephen, and that her actions on the night of the shooting stemmed from desperation to escape the abuse. Mary Catherine claimed that Stephen had reacted violently to some news and had threatened to attack her, prompting her to defend herself by grabbing a gun. She stated that the final thing she said to him before firing was for him to get out of her house. However, Stephen's friends and family rejected Mary Catherine's claims, portraying Stephen as a kind and caring individual. Stephen's mother testified that she was unaware of any threatening messages her son had sent Mary Catherine and did not approve of such conduct. Although she admitted Stephen might have said angry things, she believed he had not meant them. In court, the prosecution challenged Mary Catherine's account, stressing that she had never reported any alleged abuse by Stephen. They also introduced evidence that Mary Catherine had searched for violent and explicit material online just hours before the shooting, which she claimed was an attempt to find ways to please Stephen. The prosecution argued that Mary Catherine had altered her version of events multiple times and pointed to a text from Stephen that implied she had previously pointed a gun at him. Additionally, Stephen's friends testified that they had witnessed Mary Catherine's violent behavior toward him. After 4 hours of deliberation, the jury acquitted Mary Catherine of murder, assault, and other charges. The verdict shocked Stephen's loved ones, who felt justice had not been delivered. Later, the jurors disclosed that they believed Mary Catherine had deliberately killed Stephen, but the evidence was insufficient to prove it beyond a reasonable doubt. This lack of proof left uncertainty over whether the shooting was murder or self-defense. Moving on to the next case. Matthew Patrick Matt Podolak. Matthew Patrick Matt Podolak was born on June 10, 1975, in Ohio, USA, to Patricia Romano and Leonard Podolak. In high school, Matthew was part of the hockey team. After graduation, he enlisted in the U.S. Navy and later began working at Phoenix Industrial Finishing, a company owned by his uncle. Although this job offered opportunities for advancement, Matthew found it difficult to connect with his co-workers, who may have felt envious of his privileged position. His sister, Chrissy Duca, believed the tension partly stemmed from rumors of an upcoming promotion, which his colleagues thought he did not deserve. Outside of work, Matthew was an outdoor enthusiast who loved boating, camping, and hunting. He also spent his free time playing softball and hockey. In 2003, Matthew met Holly McFeature, and they began dating soon after, eventually moving in together in Cleveland. This relationship marked a new phase in Matthew's life. Friends said he was eager to settle down and start a family. Together, Matthew and Holly had 2 children, Samantha and Josh, and also raised Holly's child from a previous relationship as part of their family. Matthew's mother, Patricia, said that he loved Holly deeply and that his feelings for her were genuine. His life underwent a major transformation as he shifted from being a bachelor to a father of 3 within a short span of time. At first, his relationship with Holly was filled with affection and mutual understanding. However, by 2005, their relationship had deteriorated, becoming increasingly tense and argumentative. On several occasions, Matthew would leave home after a fight with Holly and stay overnight at a friend's place. Friends, who were becoming increasingly worried about him, advised Matthew to end the relationship, describing Holly's selfishness as a serious warning sign. Despite their concerns, Matthew ignored the advice and kept returning to Holly. In addition, he had taken out a life insurance policy that listed Holly as the beneficiary. Even though friends urged him to remove her name, Matthew never did. During this time, his behavior became erratic, swinging from moments of extreme happiness to intense anger, sadness, and fear. According to his best friend, Russell, Matthew had fallen into a state of depression during this period. However, he appeared overly optimistic about his future, especially regarding raising his 3 children, a prospect that filled him with renewed hope. Russell advised Matthew to take precautions and remove the guns from their home due to the volatile circumstances they were living in. After the hockey season concluded in 2006, he began engaging in online gambling, which led to significant financial losses. His family and friends noticed that he was struggling with depression and encouraged him to consult a doctor. He followed their advice and was prescribed antidepressants. By the spring of 2006, Matthew's health had begun to decline. His condition worsened by Memorial Day weekend, which caused Russell to grow deeply concerned about Matthew's physical health. Around that time, Russell had asked him for help transferring a motor from one boat to another. However, Matthew was no longer the strong person he used to be, as he was suffering from severe back pain, excessive sweating, and a noticeable lack of strength. Russell urged him to visit a doctor and recommended Dr. Thomas Mandat. Matthew scheduled an appointment with Dr. Mandat for July 26, 2006. On the day of the appointment, he called Russell to ask for directions to the doctor's office. During their conversation, Russell could hear Holly arguing with Matthew in the background. Matthew went to see the doctor, complaining of back pain. After examining him, Dr. Mandat diagnosed him with kidney stones and prescribed medication to help him pass the stones and relieve the pain. In a phone call to his father on the afternoon of July 30th, Matthew expressed excitement about buying a new fishing rod for his daughter. He was looking forward to taking her fishing soon, hoping to share the experience with his father as well. Matthew's eagerness for their upcoming family outing was clearly evident in his conversation with his father. On the evening of that same day, Matthew attended a party with Russell, who found Matthew's deteriorating health extremely concerning. Matthew had gained a noticeable amount of weight, was sweating profusely, and struggled to walk. He also complained about severe back pain. Later that night, Matthew's condition worsened, prompting Holly to become alarmed. She called 911 and then phoned Matthew's father, informing him that something was seriously wrong with his son. Matthew's father briefly spoke with him over the phone and found him to be confused and visibly distressed. Matthew was rushed to the emergency room at Parma General Hospital, where doctors suspected that he was suffering from organ failure. Tests revealed that Matthew's kidneys had failed and that he was suffering from metabolic acidosis, a condition in which the blood becomes dangerously acidic. Dr. Mandat, an emergency room physician, suspected that Matthew had ingested a toxic substance such as methanol or antifreeze. When questioned, Holly denied the possibility that Matthew had consumed antifreeze or rubbing alcohol, insisting that he had not taken anything that could have caused such harm. On July 31, 2006, Matthew passed away at the hospital due to kidney failure. According to Dr. Mandat's testimony, Matthew's death was not caused by respiratory failure, which is typical in metabolic acidosis cases. Instead, Dr. Mandat explained that ethylene glycol poisoning could also result in this condition. After Matthew's death, his family and friends were devastated, but Holly appeared unaffected. In the following days, her friend Rebecca Vega tried to comfort her and accompanied her to the funeral home. However, Vega observed that Holly showed no sadness whatsoever. During the wake, Matthew's father had to ask Holly to join the family in the main room to receive guests, and even then, she appeared detached and indifferent. Russell remembered that Holly behaved as though it were an ordinary social event, showing no trace of grief. The day after Matthew's death was especially revealing. Holly used Matthew's bank card to withdraw cash from an ATM and wrote checks in his name, completely draining his bank account. When Matthew's mother reported Holly's suspicious behavior to the police, Holly was arrested and charged with 2 counts of forgery. She later agreed to restitution and was placed on probation for 1 year. Holly was listed as the beneficiary of Matthew's life insurance policy. However, the policy was relatively small, and she received only $10,000 following his death. 2 weeks later, her friend Rebecca visited Holly and noticed several cleaning products, including what appeared to be solvents, left out in the open. Since small children lived in the home, Rebecca found this concerning and asked Holly about it. Holly calmly explained that one of the bottles contained antifreeze, which Matthew had used to winterize his boat. However, Russell disputed this, explaining that Matthew's boat had not been operational since its engine broke down in 2004 or 2005. Holly's behavior after Matthew's death alarmed many people. For instance, she developed an intimate relationship with Michael Gima, a Cleveland police officer who frequently visited her home for coffee. Michael had known Holly since 2002. One day, Michael called Holly to ask if it was a good time for him to come over. She replied that there was no need to worry about that anymore because Matthew had died the previous week, speaking with no emotion whatsoever. She attributed Matthew's death to kidney problems and injuries from hockey, but her tone was indifferent and cold. Following Matthew's death, his possessions were removed from the house. Holly asked a friend to delete certain files from Matthew's computer and then cut up his clothes to make a quilt. 6 weeks after Matthew's passing, Holly began dating Charles Liffam, another Cleveland police officer. Initially, she told Charles that Matthew had died from kidney failure. However, after the autopsy report was released in January 2007, she changed her story. The autopsy revealed that Matthew had an unusually high concentration of ethylene glycol, the primary component of antifreeze, in his system. Later, Holly claimed that Matthew might have intentionally consumed something to end his life. The autopsy officially concluded that Matthew died from chronic ethylene glycol intoxication, though the coroner was unable to determine how or why he had ingested the substance. It is worth noting that Holly told Charles that she did not know what antifreeze was. Holly also gave conflicting accounts of Matthew's death, telling her friend Sean Walsh that he had died in an industrial accident. She further claimed that one of his co-workers might have poisoned him out of jealousy due to his close relationship with the boss. However, Matthew's family suspected that someone close to him might have been responsible for his death. Their doubts were partly fueled by Holly's detached demeanor at the funeral, which contrasted sharply with her sister's statement that Holly had been crying in the car beforehand. During the investigation, detectives discovered 2 bottles of antifreeze in the garage of the home Holly had recently moved from. These were collected as evidence in 2007, and the findings were documented in the police report. Later in 2007, after ending her relationship with Charles, Holly met Jameson Kennedy while working at a bar. As their relationship developed, Holly chose not to reveal any details about Matthew's death to Jameson. However, Jameson had a troubled past, including multiple convictions and issues with addiction. One evening in September 2008, while drinking together and becoming intimate, Holly grew emotional and began to cry. During this moment, she confided in Jameson about Matthew's death, admitting that she wanted to leave Cleveland and move on from her past. She allegedly confessed to adding something to Matthew's drinks that made him sick and ultimately caused his death. However, Jameson was uncertain whether she was telling the truth. Seeking guidance, Jameson turned to his friend Santiago Feliciano, an attorney, and shared what Holly had told him. Santiago advised Jameson to report the information to authorities if he believed her confession was genuine. Jameson later called Holly to discuss what she had said, unaware that their conversation was being recorded. He hoped she would admit her involvement and turn herself in, but Holly firmly denied ever harming Matthew, claiming Jameson had misunderstood her. This exchange created tension in their relationship, and Jameson began to suspect that Holly was being unfaithful. On November 8, 2008, he went to her home to confront her. Feeling threatened, Holly called the police. When officers arrived, Jameson attacked them and was subsequently arrested and charged with assault. Jameson was sentenced to 10 years in prison after being found guilty of assaulting police officers. Following his arrest, he informed investigators about a confession he claimed to have heard from Holly, allegedly connecting her to Matthew's death. This revelation further strengthened the evidence pointing toward Holly's involvement in the case. Police had initially investigated Matthew's death in 2007 after the autopsy report was released, but the inquiry stalled for years because they did not initially regard it as a deliberate act. To re-evaluate the case, it is necessary to review the autopsy findings. The autopsy was performed by Dr. Galita, an experienced forensic pathologist and medical examiner. Subsequently, Dr. Galita and County Coroner Dr. Elizabeth Balch issued their report in January 2007. The report concluded that Matthew's death resulted from chronic ethylene glycol poisoning, though the circumstances remained uncertain. When Matthew ingested ethylene glycol, it entered his bloodstream and was rapidly metabolized by his liver using an enzyme known as alcohol dehydrogenase. This reaction transformed the ethylene glycol into oxalate, which then bonded with calcium to create sharp calcium oxalate crystals. These crystals accumulated in large quantities within Matthew's kidneys, obstructing their function and causing severe damage. According to Dr. Galita, the intense pain Matthew felt in his side beginning on May 20, 2006, was likely due to these crystals forming in his kidneys. During his examination of Matthew's kidneys, Dr. Galita observed two important findings. In addition to extensive kidney damage, there were signs indicating that the kidneys had begun to heal. Further analysis revealed the presence of crystals in Matthew's heart and brain, along with evidence of acute myocarditis. Myocarditis is the inflammation of the heart muscle. The doctor explained that Matthew's myocarditis could not have been caused by ethylene glycol ingestion, noting that the inflammation would have required at least 3 weeks to develop. He also ruled out a heart attack as the cause of death. In conclusion, Dr. Galita determined that Matthew's death was the result of prolonged ethylene glycol poisoning. He believed that a series of acute toxicity episodes, occurring over a period of at least 3 months, ultimately led to Matthew's death. Matthew frequently drank iced tea at work, particularly raspberry-flavored, which he usually brought in a thermos or similar container. Matthew's friend, Michael Mao, testified that Holly often brought him lunch at work, and his meal typically included a half- or 1-gallon container of iced tea. In August 2007, police discovered 2 bottles of antifreeze in the garage of Holly's former residence, after she had already moved out. One bottle was a Peak brand, and the other a Saturn brand. 3 years after Matthew's autopsy report was first released, an amendment was issued in 2010. The revised report, signed by County Coroner Dr. Frank Miller, reaffirmed that Matthew's death was caused by ethylene glycol poisoning, a toxic compound found in antifreeze, and classified the manner of death as homicide. 6 years after Matthew's passing, authorities determined it was time to arrest Holly. In July of that year, she was formally charged with the grave offense of taking Matthew's life. The charges did not surprise Matthew's family. His older brother, Mark, stated that they had long suspected Holly's involvement in his death. Mark explained that her behavior during that time seemed off, remarking that she didn't act like someone who had just lost a loved one. Investigators suspected that Holly had secretly poisoned Matthew by adding antifreeze to his cold raspberry tea over the course of several weeks or even months. In 2013, she appeared in court and pleaded not guilty to the charges. However, there was no direct evidence linking her to the crime, only circumstantial indications of her guilt. To build their case, the prosecution called 15 witnesses to testify, including Matthew's family and friends, Dr. Galita, who conducted the autopsy, Dr. Thomas Mandat, Matthew's physician, and several police officers involved in the investigation. The witnesses highlighted several critical details, such as Holly's suspicious behavior, a phone call Matthew made before visiting his doctor, and the fact that his boat had not been operational since 2004, making it clear he had no reason to keep antifreeze. Holly's defense team countered by arguing that Matthew's family and friends had prematurely judged her as guilty and subsequently pressured law enforcement to file charges against her following his death. The prosecution's most compelling testimony came from Dr. Galita, the medical examiner who conducted the autopsy. Dr. Galita provided a thorough explanation of his conclusion that Matthew had been the victim of chronic poisoning over a 3-month period. He reached this conclusion based on the presence of crystals in Matthew's kidneys and myocarditis, an inflammation of the heart muscle that can occur as a result of ethylene glycol exposure. After ruling out other possible causes of myocarditis, such as infection, Dr. Galita emphasized that Matthew's condition could not have resulted from a single, short-term exposure to ethylene glycol. Dr. Galita also explained why the original autopsy report, completed in 2007, did not identify Matthew's death as intentional. He stated that at the time, the coroner's office lacked sufficient information to make that determination, which led to the cause of death being recorded as undetermined. However, following further investigation, the report was later revised. The testimony of other witnesses corroborated Dr. Galita's conclusions. Matthew's friends testified that his health had begun to deteriorate in the spring of 2006, which aligned with his diagnosis of kidney stones in July 2006. The friends also described the turbulent nature of Matthew and Holly's relationship, stating that Matthew appeared fearful and had removed firearms from their home on a friend's advice. Holly's attorneys maintained that their client had no involvement in Matthew's death, suggesting instead that his depression had driven him to take his own life. According to the defense, Matthew was struggling with online gambling losses, problems at work, and difficulties communicating with his child, all of which led him to intentionally ingest a fatal dose of antifreeze. The defense argued that Matthew's death was the result of a single instance of ingestion rather than prolonged exposure over time. To support this claim, they called Dr. Robert Lux, the coroner from El Paso County, Colorado, to testify in court. Dr. Lux testified that Matthew's death resulted from acute poisoning caused by a single ingestion of ethylene glycol, suggesting a possible suicidal intent. He disagreed with Dr. Galita's diagnosis of myocarditis, asserting instead that Matthew had suffered a heart attack. Furthermore, Dr. Lux stated that myocarditis can develop independently of ethylene glycol poisoning and that flank pain is not a typical symptom of such poisoning. He also noted that there was no connection between kidney stones and ethylene glycol poisoning, a point that held significance in the case. Several key witnesses testified during the trial. One notable witness was Jameson Kennedy, a convicted felon serving a 10-year prison sentence for assaulting police officers. Jameson claimed that Holly had confessed to mixing something into Matthew's drinks. However, Holly denied ever making such a statement. She contended that Jameson's testimony stemmed either from a desire to receive leniency in his own case or from personal revenge against her. After 3 days of deliberation, the jury returned a guilty verdict on all counts. On August 28, 2013, the court sentenced Holly McFeature to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 30 years. Moving on to the next case. Vera Pectoleva. Vera Pectoleva was born on September 24, 1997, in Kyslov, located in Kovo Oblast. While growing up, Vera became a joyful and inventive person with a passion for singing. Her skill allowed her to achieve first place in several singing competitions while still in school. Even though her parents, Oksana and Yevon, separated during her school years, Vera kept a close bond with both of them. She also got along with her stepmother and stepfather, and people who knew her described Vera as positive, gentle, and kind. Vera surprised her relatives when she chose to pursue a technical education instead of a creative path after completing high school. She enrolled at the State Technical University in Kovo. Although Vera lives in Kovo, she keeps a strong relationship with her mother, Oksana, who lives in Kyslov, nearly 110 miles away. During a visit to her mother in 2016, she met a man her age named Vladislav Canis. Commonly called Vladislav, unlike Vera, he had no real goals in life, was withdrawn, and possessed a volatile nature. Vladislav left school after the 9th grade and was raised in a troubled household. His mother left, so he remained with his father. However, the struggles in his life did not end there. His father encountered issues with the law, and it all ended in his suicide directly in front of Vladislav. This left a permanent mark on him. Despite their vastly different backgrounds, Vera developed deep emotions for Vladislav, loving him wholeheartedly. Vera's parents knew Vladislav and opposed their relationship. Although they pitted Vladislav for his hard life, they imagined another path for Vera. "We did not approve of her choice, expecting her to eventually leave him," said her mother, Oksana. When Vera's father became aware of their relationship, he urged her to end things with Vladislav, but Vera refused. Instead, she simply avoided talking about him to her parents. Vera's mother, Oksana, recalls that Vladislav was never seen at family events and never appeared in Vera's social media posts, almost as if Vera was purposely concealing him. It should be mentioned that in 2019, Vera and Vladislav started living together in Koval. Vera's parents assisted them financially by contributing toward the rent for the apartment. At that period, Vladislav had no job and depended on Vera for monetary support. She was not only attractive and intelligent, but also financially secure. The relationship between Vera and Vladislav grew tense because of Vladislav's heavy drinking, and he showed no intention of stopping. Vera's parents began to suspect that he was mistreating their daughter. In November 2019, Vera made the decision to end the relationship. Nevertheless, Vladislav refused to accept this and did not want the relationship to conclude. Vladislav was supposed to be the one to leave the apartment, but he had no plan of doing so. He wished to keep enjoying the benefits of living at another's expense. 3 minutes later, she sent a new voice message to her friend, asking her to come assist Vera with moving. Yet, before Vera managed to finish her sentence, Vladislav cut her off, firmly saying, no one is coming in here," indicating that he did not allow her friend to come into their apartment to help her move. At approximately 5:15 p.m., Vera quietly asked her friend to come over, most likely because she required assistance. Vera spoke in a low voice, apparently so that Vladislav would not overhear. 10 minutes later, at 5:25 p.m., Vera sent another voice message. This time, Vladislav answered loudly, instructing Vera's friend not to come and to wait until Vera texted her. Nearly 2 hours later, at 7:19 p.m., Vladislav seized control of Vera's phone, sending a voice message himself. From then on, Vera no longer had control over her phone and was left alone with Vladislav. At 3 a.m., a disturbance erupted when the neighbors on the same floor were startled awake by horrifying screams coming from apartment 738. A witness described the scene as a bloodbath, vividly recounting the horrors happening right before their eyes. The screams were overwhelming, drawing a group of 15 people into the hallway near the apartment. Among them was Vladislav's brother. He had overheard Vladislav say that he was going to kill Vera. The brother realized that immediate action was necessary. However, the apartment's iron door was a difficult obstacle. The neighbors began searching for tools that might help them force the door open and stop the tragedy unfolding inside. Throughout this, Vera's cries of pain could still be heard coming from the apartment. A grave situation developed when the police failed to respond quickly to emergency calls. At about 3 a.m., emergency services were contacted after people witnessed a traumatic incident involving Vera and her ex-boyfriend, Vladislav. Even though several calls were made, the police did not show up at the location until 6:30 a.m., which was 3.5 hours later. Vera's neighbors, in desperation, contacted emergency services 7 separate times. While Vera struggled for her life, no one came. The final words the neighbors heard from Vladislav were, "Vera, forgive me, I love you very much." As the crisis intensified, the neighbors located a crowbar in a nearby parking area and forced Vera's door open. Sadly, what they found was devastating. Vera was lying still, while Vladislav was discovered intoxicated in the bathroom. The neighbors attempted in vain to get support from the police. Operator 112 had been socializing, laughing, and drinking tea while chatting about their personal lives, and they were very annoyed at being disturbed. The police only arrived at the location after learning that Vera had passed away. At first, they explained their delay by blaming a shortage of fuel in one of their vehicles and an insufficient number of officers available due to other emergencies. Both the 112 operator and the police officer on duty that night were brought to trial. Footage from the police station was shown during the investigation, exposing their careless attitude. Vladislav's testimony confirmed that no dispute had occurred between him and Vera until 5 a.m. He recalled an argument with Vera on December 15, 2019, which began because he wanted to go to a nightclub, but she refused. This incident was not the start of their difficulties, as Vera had already mentioned ending their relationship a month earlier. She also started spending more time in Kaislav and less time with him. Vladislav later learned from a mutual friend that Vera was involved with another man named Alexander from Kaislav. Even though he did not personally know Alexander, Vladislav still wished to confront Vera about it. Despite the strain between them, they continued to live in the same apartment and stayed in contact by phone. After a quarrel on December 15, 2019, Vera left the apartment, taking part of her possessions with her. On January 12, 2020, he reached out to Vera and offered to help her move the remainder of her possessions to a new apartment. She agreed to his proposal, and they arranged to meet the following day to complete the move. Vera set a meeting with him on the afternoon of January 13, 2020, so they could collect her belongings and transfer them to her new apartment. However, his intention was not solely to help Vera move. He also planned to move himself, as he did not wish to remain in the apartment without her. When Vera arrived on January 13, 2020, sometime between 4 o'clock and 6 p.m., they agreed to pack both of their possessions, making it a shared move. On January 14, 2020, they consumed a large amount of alcohol, including beer, spirits, and vodka, while packing. By around 5 a.m., both I and Vera were drunk. At first, there were no conflicts between them. However, the situation shifted when he raised the subject of their past relationship and told her that he was aware she was seeing someone else. Vera became offended by this, and the discussion escalated into a heated dispute. She turned aggressive, used insulting words, and physically attacked him. In particular, she kicked him several times in the groin and struck him multiple times in the face with the palm of her hand. The slaps did not cause him serious pain, but the kicks to the groin did. This started a fight, which made him furious. He was angered not only by her attacks, but also by her lack of honesty about dating others and her accusations that he had crossed boundaries when discussing her personal matters. During this period, Vladislav asserted that Vera continued insulting him, which was the account he presented to the police. However, the medical examination demonstrated that he was lying. Vera's fatal injuries did not occur at the time of her death, but about 6 hours earlier, close to midnight. This timeline revealed that Vladislav had repeatedly assaulted and injured Vera throughout the 6 hours before she ultimately succumbed to her injuries. The medical report documented nearly 100 wounds on her body, including stab injuries, a fractured nose, broken ribs, and evidence of strangulation on her neck. Following this tragic event, Vera's funeral drew more than 1,000 mourners, but the church could not accommodate everyone. Vera's heartbroken mother, Oksana, disclosed that the funeral home spent 4 hours attempting to reconstruct her daughter's badly disfigured face with cosmetics. Despite these attempts, Oksana was hardly able to recognize her own daughter. Such was the extent of the damage to her body. Meanwhile, Vladislav was giving his version of events to the police. Naturally, he tried to minimize his role in the crime. Furthermore, the involvement of Vladislav's brother at the crime scene raised many suspicions since he resided in another city. Vladislav offered an explanation for his brother's presence. According to him, after the incident, he contacted his brother and informed him that Vera was no longer breathing. His brother advised him to call for an ambulance and attempt resuscitation along with first aid on Vera. Yet, phone records indicated that Vladislav had called his brother at around midnight and stated that he planned to kill Vera. During interrogation, he was questioned about the numerous injuries found on Vera's body. In response, he claimed that it was possible he had inflicted them, although he could not remember how many times he had struck her. The wounds documented by the expert could indeed have been caused by him. He confessed to having inflicted all of the injuries mentioned in the report. During the altercation, his primary aim was to silence her, and he did not think about Vera's suffering. Vera screamed and insulted him continuously during the fight. He emphasized that he did not derive satisfaction from hitting her. Rather, his intention was only to make her stop screaming. And the investigation concluded that the police and emergency services personnel had been negligent. Despite this, they were not suspended throughout the investigation and continued justifying their actions. The prosecutor argued for actual prison terms for the 5 defendants, but the judge decided to reduce the punishment to 1.5 to 2 years of suspended sentences. In addition to this, the court ordered each police officer to pay around $350 to the victim. The police department itself was also ordered to pay nearly $111,000. Russia uses its own currency, the ruble, but I have converted all amounts into US dollars for clarity and understanding. The indictment stated that the police had fuel, and even if they had not, they should still have taken proper steps to handle the situation. Moreover, the police declined to cooperate with the inquiry and refused to accept responsibility for their conduct. According to their version, when witnesses reported hearing a woman's desperate screams for help, the police unit was at a different location investigating the discovery of a man's body. We will likely never know exactly what truly happened that night. Vera had intended to leave the apartment and even asked a friend for help. Based on this, it can be assumed that Vladislav forced Vera to consume alcohol or poured it into her mouth while she was unconscious. This provided him the opportunity to construct a version of events portraying them as accidental. In 2022, the court sentenced Vladislav Canis to 17 years in prison. Although Vladislav admitted partial responsibility and was ordered to pay nearly $45,000 in compensation, Vera's parents were devastated by the verdict. They believed that 17 years was far too lenient a sentence and planned to appeal. However, their hopes soon proved futile. Vladislav did not even serve a full year behind bars. In April 2023, it became known that he had received a presidential pardon after only 6 months of participating in the armed conflict. You already know which conflict Russia is currently engaged in. He was also released from paying any compensation to Vera's parents. In November 2023, photographs of Vladislav in military uniform appeared on social media. Vera's case has generated massive outrage across Russia. The news of Vladislav's pardon was equally resounding. Here is what the Russian presidential press secretary stated regarding the issue. The pardon procedure involves several steps. First, the convicted individual must publicly acknowledge his guilt. The initial decision is made by the Federal Penitentiary Service, then examined at both the regional and federal levels, and afterward by the Central Committee. Only after moving through these stages does the president review the case for consideration. Furthermore, convicted individuals, even those guilty of severe crimes, can achieve redemption through their courage on the battlefield, putting their lives at risk under fire. This is presented as a means for them to atone for their past wrongs. Imagine the anguish Vera's parents must have endured upon learning that the man responsible for ending their daughter's life had been granted a second chance. In stark contrast, Vera will never again have the opportunity to begin anew, as her life was brutally cut short, leaving her no chance at redemption. Moving on to the next case. Michelle Davis. Michelle Davis was born on December 15, 1966, and lived in Des Moines. In 2008, 41-year-old Michelle resided in Des Moines with her 3 children. Those who knew her described Michelle as friendly, adventurous, and deeply passionate about motorcycles. Working as a secretary at a trucking company, she had earned respect and authority among her colleagues. Her divorce was nearing finalization, marking a significant turning point in her life. Michelle had recently moved into her own apartment and obtained a restraining order against her husband, Randy Davis. The months leading up to their separation had been tense and emotionally difficult for the entire family. On Thursday, September 11, 2008, Michelle was at work as usual. Her co-workers noticed that after her separation from Randy, she appeared unusually carefree, as though a heavy burden had been lifted from her shoulders. She was in good spirits and left the office around 4:30 p.m. after completing her duties. Shortly afterward, the 911 dispatch center began receiving calls from witnesses reporting a car accident on Interstate 235. A Mercury Sable had overturned, with an unconscious woman still secured by her seatbelt in the driver's seat. Sadly, paramedics were unable to save her, and the victim was identified as Michelle Davis. At first, police believed that Michelle had simply lost control of her vehicle, leading to the fatal crash. However, by the following day, that theory was dismissed. A forensic examination determined that Michelle's death had been caused by a gunshot wound to the head, not by injuries from the rollover accident. The recovered bullet was sent for further testing in hopes of identifying the shooter. Investigators assigned to the case soon realized they were dealing with an unusual and complex situation. While awaiting the ballistic results, local authorities implemented measures to ensure public safety. There was growing concern that Michelle might have been the victim of a random attack, raising fears that the perpetrator could strike again. Moreover, given the heavy traffic on the interstate, numerous drivers were potentially at risk of being targeted by the same shooter. Given the urgency of the situation, police increased their patrols throughout the city. Once it was confirmed that Michelle's death had not been an accident, detectives returned to the scene to gather evidence. Unfortunately, they were unable to find any significant leads, including a cartridge case or other physical traces. The initial assumption that Michelle's death resulted from a car accident had prompted traffic services to clear the site, likely destroying crucial evidence in the process. Nevertheless, detectives did not lose hope. They decided to review traffic camera footage, which had helped solve many previous cases. By examining all available recordings, investigators focused on identifying the camera located closest to the crash site. After reviewing the footage for about half an hour, they located the relevant clip. The video showed Michelle's vehicle overturning, but the image quality was poor, with choppy and intermittent frames that made it difficult to discern the sequence of events. Despite managing to extract a few relevant stills, investigators were unable to find conclusive proof explaining what led to the rollover. The team faced immense frustration, convinced that they had found a critical clue that could solve the case, only to discover that it was a dead end. With no solid evidence, the police were left with no option but to continue analyzing the remaining footage and searching for additional eyewitnesses. While one team of investigators meticulously reviewed recordings from the traffic cameras, the lead investigator on Michelle Davis's case visited her family to deliver a heartbreaking update. What had initially been presumed to be an accident was, in fact, a deliberate act of violence. The revelation that Michelle had been murdered left her family in utter shock. The devastating news was especially painful for her father, Lee Costner. His wife, Patty, Michelle's mother, had passed away years earlier, and Lee had already endured the loss of a child once before. His first daughter, Cheryl Sue Costner, had died in 1965 at just 1 year old. Now, 43 years later, he was once again confronted with the unimaginable grief of losing another daughter. Outliving one's children is arguably the most unbearable tragedy a parent can endure. Michelle's family informed investigators that her life had recently gone through major changes. They suspected that the only person who might want to harm her was her husband, Randy Davis, due to their ongoing divorce and the restraining order she had filed against him. While examining Michelle's background, another detective spoke with her co-workers and learned that she had formed a close relationship with a colleague named Matt Jorgensen. According to Michelle's friends, the feelings between them were mutual. However, because Michelle was still in the process of divorcing Randy, the two decided to keep their relationship private, sharing it only with a few co-workers and trusted friends. As a result, police now had two potential suspects, Randy Davis and Matt Jorgensen. When investigators attempted to contact Randy, they were unable to reach him, as every call went straight to voicemail. In contrast, they successfully spoke with Matt, who candidly discussed his relationship with Michelle and provided a detailed account of his activities on the day of her death. Matt stated that they never argued or fought. Deeply shaken by Michelle's passing, he fully cooperated with the investigation. After confirming his alibi, police ruled him out as a suspect. The ballistic report revealed that the murder had been committed using a .22 caliber rifle fired at close range. Because the shooting occurred on the interstate, investigators believed the perpetrator was likely driving another vehicle alongside Michelle's at the time of the attack. A new lead surfaced when police received a call from Michelle's insurance company, informing them that her brother, Todd, had filed a claim for her life insurance payout. This development raised suspicions, as insurance-related murders were not uncommon. A detective decided to visit Todd to question him about the matter. During the interview, Todd realized he was being treated as a suspect and quickly clarified his actions. He explained that the family was facing financial difficulties and could not afford a proper funeral for Michelle, so he had filed the insurance claim solely to cover her funeral expenses. Further investigation into Todd's alibi confirmed that he had indeed been in another part of the city at the time of Michelle's death, effectively ruling him out as the shooter. Todd then provided police with information that pointed to another possible suspect, Michelle's stepson, Josh. At the time of the incident, Josh was an adult who had recently returned from serving in the Marines. Being skilled in the use of firearms, Josh became a person of interest in the investigation. Detectives began to explore potential motives that might have driven Josh to commit the crime. In another development, a witness came forward with a critical piece of information. A woman driving on Interstate 235 around the same time as Michelle's crash reported seeing a red pickup truck, likely a Ford F-150, whose driver was acting erratically. The driver, described as a white man wearing a baseball cap, was swerving between lanes, appearing as though he was chasing someone. Although the witness's description was limited, investigators considered this information highly significant and decided to pursue it further. The inquiry into Michelle's death led detectives to review traffic camera footage, focusing specifically on sightings of a red pickup truck. The woman's tip had prompted this line of investigation, And indeed, the footage revealed a red truck following Michelle after she left her workplace. Although the image quality was poor, making it impossible to identify the driver or the license plates, additional recordings from other cameras confirmed that the same truck had trailed Michelle along her entire route. This strongly indicated that the killer had likely targeted Michelle deliberately. Detectives soon discovered that Michelle's husband, Randy Davis, owned a red pickup truck. They promptly went to his residence, but found that he was not at home. However, his son Josh, a Marine with professional firearms training, was there. Josh told investigators that Randy had spent the day of Michelle's death shopping with his sister, after which he returned home and spent the evening watching television. He also revealed that Michelle's divorce from Randy had been complicated, primarily because she demanded half the value of their house. Additionally, Josh mentioned that his father had returned home around 5:30 p.m. that evening. Josh's account of the incident appeared questionable, and the conversation with him suggested that he might have had a motive for the crime. When his father and Michelle divorced, she would receive a share of the estate, which made him unhappy. However, these were merely suspicions, and without concrete evidence, there was insufficient basis for an arrest or formal charges. As Michelle's family prepared for her funeral, police continued searching for new leads. They investigated stores and gas stations located along the route between Michelle's workplace and the site of her death to gather additional surveillance footage. Near Michelle's workplace, one store provided another crucial piece of evidence. The surveillance camera inside the store also captured part of the parking lot. On September 11, 2008, the day Michelle died, a red pickup truck was recorded parking near the store's entrance at around 4 p.m. Police identified the vehicle as belonging to Randy, but since Josh also used it, they needed to determine who had been driving it that day. The footage showed the driver exit the truck, enter the store, then disappear from view for a short period before reappearing to make a purchase and leave. Due to the poor video quality, it was impossible to tell whether the driver was Randy or Josh. To clarify the sequence of events, here's what occurred. Michelle left work at 4:30 p.m., but police examined the timeline preceding that moment. Around 4 p.m., a series of events unfolded near the store where Michelle worked. Upon reviewing the footage, officers noticed the same pickup truck returning to the store multiple times within the next 30 minutes. During each visit, the driver never exited the vehicle, but instead turned around and drove off. The last sighting of the truck occurred just as Michelle left work. Despite police efforts to identify the driver, they were ultimately unsuccessful. The police then decided to make another attempt to contact Randy. This time, they succeeded, and Randy came to the police station. Before beginning the interview, the officers clarified that Randy was not under arrest and explained his rights. During questioning, the police asked Randy about his whereabouts on September 11th. Randy explained that he and Michelle were in the process of divorcing after 17 years of marriage. He also mentioned that he worked as a carpenter and had gone to work that day. When asked what time he returned home from work, Randy hesitated before saying that he arrived home at 3:45 p.m. However, this statement conflicted with both the surveillance footage and Josh's testimony. According to Josh, his father came home around 5:30 p.m., which was nearly 2 hours later than the time Randy had given. Randy also claimed that he had not left the house after 3:45 p.m. and that he was alone until Josh arrived, after which they cooked dinner together. This account directly contradicted Josh's version, as Josh had stated that he was already at home when his father returned. The conflicting statements from Randy and Josh indicated that one of them was lying. To observe Randy's reaction, investigators informed him that Michelle's death had actually been caused by a gunshot wound rather than injuries from the car accident. This information had been kept strictly confidential and was known only to Michelle's family. Randy's reaction to this revelation appeared highly suspicious. He showed almost no reaction, pretending to be surprised while averting his gaze. When asked about his last conversation with Michelle, Randy requested a lawyer, effectively ending the interrogation. Since the investigation still lacked key evidence, including the murder weapon, the police had no choice but to release him. In the days following Michelle's death, her family and friends gathered for her funeral on September 15, 2008. Randy attended the service, attempting to appear sorrowful and even breaking into tears. Meanwhile, investigators continued their efforts to identify the killer as quickly as possible. Unexpectedly, a breakthrough came when Josh, accompanied by his lawyer, arrived at the police station and expressed his intention to provide a statement. According to Josh, on the day of the incident, he had returned home from his sister's house to find his father, Randy, standing in the driveway with their car. When Josh entered the house, he saw Randy holding a gun, and his father warned him to stay back, saying it would be better if he didn't come inside at that moment. Josh stated that he immediately realized what his father intended to do and tried to stop him, pleading with Randy not to make a terrible mistake he would later regret. Despite Josh's desperate pleas, Randy drove away and returned later, parking the car in the garage. At that moment, Randy confessed to Josh that he had shot Michelle. It became clear that Randy had been unable to accept Michelle's decision to file for divorce and her intention to claim a share of their property. On September 11, 2008, Randy had waited near Michelle's workplace, circling the area several times to ensure he didn't miss her. This explained why he was seen multiple times in the store's surveillance footage. Once Michelle left work, Randy followed her until he found the right moment to act. He rolled down the passenger side window and fired the shot. Based on Josh's testimony, the police arrested Randy. Before the trial began, Randy agreed to a plea deal, admitting to taking Michelle's life in exchange for a reduced sentence. Consequently, 53-year-old Randy Davis was sentenced to 50 years in prison in 2010. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed exploring these intriguing cold cases with me. If you found the video fascinating, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to Cold Case Mystique for more deep dives into cold case investigations. Your support helps me bring you more compelling content. Leave a comment below with your thoughts or any cases you'd like me to cover next. See you in the next video. And remember, the search for truth never stops.